If you're following the development of highly anticipated fan-made Oblivion remake Skyblivion, you'll probably be aware that one of its senior creatives took to Twitter recently to criticise the project.
I'm D Keys. I was a level designer on the Skyblivion project.
And that would be this guy, D Keys, who we interviewed for this video because sometimes we do actually do journalism, believe it or not. In the process of his whistleblowing, D perhaps unwittingly cast doubt on whether Skyblivion would ever be finished, and whether it would live up to the level of quality presented in its slick marketing. Officially, Skyblivion maintains that it's going to release this year and that it's going to be great. Obviously, they've spent over a decade on this thing, devoting countless evenings and weekends of their free time to the goal of modernising the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion. Despite the fact that they're not getting paid, despite the fact that Bethesda just released an official Unreal 5 based overhaul of Oblivion, which leapfrogs the now ancient tech that Skyblivion is being made with.
Is there a problem?
Which leads me to the question, can a fan-made project ever truly rival the quality of a professionally developed game?
Our team has been chipping away at a seemingly impossible feat.
Well, the answer is an emphatic yes if you ask a lot of Elder Scrolls or Fallout obsessives, many of whom have pinned their hopes on fan-made total conversion mods to get their fix of hyper-immersive open-world RPG. And a lot of them remain upset with Bethesda for not getting their finger out, for dumbing down their games, you name it. There is a perception, rightly or wrongly, that Bethesda have lost their way, and so people turn to the hobbyists.
We might find that the fan-made Skyblivion is better than the official Oblivion Remaster.
Having these mods to fill the gaps and do some more kind of out there interesting things has been the best thing that you could hope for, especially for a developer in Bethesda that, at least in terms of recent history, seems to be a lot more conservative.
We always have to make it clear that, like, we're doing this because we love what they did back then. I don't know why people feel compelled to pit us against each other.
But what of the people who spend so much of their free time on hobbyist total conversion projects that, by their very nature, can't be monetized? What motivates them to do it?
I'm always curious about everyone's individual motivations as to why they're doing it, but I assume there's a lot of people who are trying to get jobs with Bethesda.
High-profile mod projects like Fallout London, Tamriel Rebuilt, Fallout Miami, and Ender All Forgotten Stories all offer something that seems too good to be true. Completely free Bethesda-style RPGs, fully or partially playable, made by people doing it for passion rather than, less noble reasons like because it's their job. When did money for goods and services motivate anyone to make art, right? Right?
It definitely is a good thing for your portfolio, don't get me wrong. It's just, for, I think, the majority of us on the project, that wasn't the focus. It was just wanting to see people play this amazing game that we've made.
I've made things that are just for fun, using other IPs and things, but nothing's going to come from that. It's not really a portfolio thing.
You had a first-person Mario 1-1.
Yes, yeah, the Super 1-1 challenge. It was a month-long challenge to basically remake a classic game level in your own style. So I kind of made it in the style of a first-person shooter that looks a bit like Mario Galaxy. There was nothing that was going to come from that. I was learning, obviously. I was learning more about Unreal. I was learning more about various tools needed to build a game like that.
Some of the hardest work that I've done is not something I can really show off in a portfolio. I spent like months and a lot of sleepless nights making the interior kit for Leowin's houses, so I did, but I couldn't show that off because another 3D artist had started it by making like interior shells, like entire rooms. I took it and I made like individual wall pieces and floor pieces because the developers on Skyblivion kind of prefer kits as opposed to tile sets. It's essentially somebody else's work that I've spent a very, very long time, adapting.
Even if you're viewing it as your route into the games industry and that's your end game, the barrier for me would just be getting bored. You're working on the same thing for that long. Eventually you'll just get sick of sight of it would be the problem.
So if you're thinking portfolio first, you wouldn't be able to do something like that because it would just hurt working that hard on something you can't necessarily show off as yours. Skyblivion is one of the smaller teams, so it is, but the people who do work on it regularly are absolute powerhouse developers. They'll be staying up, 2 days in a row working on something, not because they're told to, but because they want to.
In free time projects, I think if they're not fun, I don't know why you're doing it.
Skyblivion aims to remake The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion with the engine, gameplay and quality of life experience of The Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim. It's been in active development for almost as long as Skyrim has been available, and its profile went absolutely stratospheric this year with the announcement of the long-rumoured Oblivion Remastered. A massive official visual overhaul of the original game, Beyoncé dropped onto Game Pass, leading to a lot of immediate speculation about what on earth this meant for the humble Skyblivion project, whose stated goal is to remake Oblivion with more modern sensibilities. And you can't get more modern than Unreal Engine 5, most computers can barely run the bloody thing.
The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion Remake, reported to be in the works and set for release this year. Details for the unannounced game were accidentally released by a former employee at video game support studio Virtuos.
The Oblivion Remake keeps on leaking.
When rumours of the upcoming remaster picked up pace a few years back, it's not hard to imagine that some of the Skyblivion team must have been concerned.
That rumor of the remake, I think it was going on for like 2 years, maybe. It was not set in stone whether it was a remake or a remaster, and so we were concerned. So we were, because we didn't know what it was.
With Oblivion Remastered, you might assume that Bethesda and their collaborators at Virtuos rendered Skyblivion effectively redundant. Or you might agree with much of the vocal fan base who think that an officially sanctioned remaster is utterly pointless, with a proper remake like Skyblivion waiting in the wings.
I kind of played Oblivion Remastered and was like, I would have liked this to try and do more, to make it different, do the kind of things that Skyblivion is doing in terms of expanding it and just making the world feel a bit more lived in. To actually pique my interest, you've got to offer something substantially different from what I've already seen, because otherwise, for me, that's a fleeting appeal.
You'd think people would be more excited for the official product, but nobody hates Bethesda as much as Bethesda fans, and so Skyblivion has found itself in the position of almost directly competing with Oblivion Remastered in the eyes of its supporters. But as it turns out, Skyblivion and Oblivion Remastered are two vastly different projects with vastly different goals, and any rivalry or hard feelings between the two things has been entirely imagined by people on social media. If anything, the people behind Skyblivion, rather than disheartened, were energised by the emergence and runaway success of Oblivion Remastered, which they saw as encouraging proof that the world still loves Oblivion and is receptive to playing a new, modernised take on it.
It was kind of a huge relief because we realized, oh, they're doing something completely different. They're doing like a very faithful remaster, and we were going for just something more remade from the ground up. So it was. So we definitely saw that there was space for both of us. I don't know how it felt for like the leads, because at the time I wasn't a lead no longer. So I wasn't aware of how the leads were feeling. I always felt like that was kind of a problem, you know, on the project later on. We didn't know what the leads were feeling. We didn't know why decisions were being made, that they were being made.
All seemed well in the Skyblivion camp until it came under friendly fire from D, one of its most prolific contributors, whose Twitter critique made public his belief that the project was being mismanaged, and that essentially too much energy was being spent on promoting the thing rather than making the thing, despite time rapidly running out to make their planned 2025 release window.
It was frustrating me to see. If I said, you know, I'm a little bit concerned about 2025, and suddenly this person who had never said anything comes out and goes, oh yeah, me too, I don't think it's gonna happen. Like, we just have too much to do. If that person's a lead, I'm always like, say something, please, say something. You need to say something. It was definitely a concern a number of people had. Just for some reason, nobody was saying it. It was just more of like a sort of a bit of a heavy feeling that was surrounding a lot of developers. And for lack of a more elegant term, I'm sometimes a bit of a shit stirrer. If nobody's saying anything, I'm going to try and get people to say something. You know, I didn't want it to be an argument or anything like that. It's just what really wanted to be taken seriously as a concern. So it was, because I feel like paid developers would struggle to make this release date. Never mind, you know, unpaid developers who are doing it on their free time.
When I saw his tweet, I was surprised, because just in the time that I've been covering it, it seemed like a very united front and very kind of buttoned down. They're established. All of the kind of big, difficult kind of existential conversations in terms of what do we want this project to be have been had near the start. They've had to face more than they would have bargained for anyway with all of the Oblivion Remastered stuff.
It's undeniable that Skyblivion has been marketed extraordinarily well, with slick trailers showing off reimagined Oblivion locations that look just as detailed and intricate as if Bethesda themselves had done the work. But according to D, a lot of the release material amounts to elaborate bullshots, with tons of work work going into producing footage that looks good from certain fixed angles for trailer purposes, while the actual game languished in a much less polished state, with essential work being delayed in order to project the image of an endeavour that was much further along than it actually was. I will remind you though that officially, Skyblivion still says it's on track for 2025.
I was concerned that in order to make that release date, we're going to be cutting corners that we shouldn't be cutting. Because there's always like corners maybe you can cut that people aren't really going to notice or it's not too important. But when you start cutting the quality, you start getting into a territory of like, why are we doing this? If we're putting out assets or environments that don't even look as good as Oblivion, we're not living up to the whole point of the project. And that was definitely a concern I had. It was a concern other developers had. It was just a bit of a struggle to get that listened to.
So we end up in a situation where Skyblivion, a fan project, a hobbyist endeavour ostensibly being done for a bit of fun, a bit of community kudos, and if possible something to stick on the resumes of those involved, is starting to fall foul of the same internal pressures as a professional endeavour. There's pressure to hit milestones by certain dates, there's crunch creeping in to get the work done, people are cutting corners to make deadlines instead of spending the time where they want to spend it in order to make something they can be proud of. This no longer sounds like a fun-time fan project, this sounds like a job. Though it has to be said that Skyblivion, if it is falling foul of this phenomenon, it's hardly the first mod project to do so.
I worked on Project Borealis for a while, so I got to see what modding was like in the modern era. Well, even though it's not really modding, technically you're making an indie game at that point if you're using a different engine and everything. But I got to see what the difference was between, say, 2005 and 2020 or 2018, whenever it was. And there was definitely an air of a corporate air to it. There were schedules and workloads and things, and I was doing it just because I wanted to do something different from my day-to-day job, and then felt that maybe that wasn't what modding was anymore. There were allocated tasks rather than people just making things, putting things in a game, seeing what stuck. It was more about having a structure and milestones, and by treating a project that's potentially for fun as a mock business opportunity, I don't really know how else to describe it. It turns into a product.
And naturally, if you're treating and promoting this product like a professional endeavour, people will have an expectation of professional results. Fallout London may be the most high-profile mod release ever made. It looked as polished as an official DLC, and even had cameos from 2 former Doctor Who's.
It may be our best work yet.
It was so successfully marketed that it got an official release on GOG, who agreed to host the enormous downloads required and help make installation of the thing a breeze, particularly if you own a GOG copy of Fallout 4 if you're wondering what's in it for them. But can a fan-made project ever live up to that kind of runaway hype? There's no denying that Fallout London is an incredible piece of work, but certainly at launch, it was not a consistently good experience for end users. People had no end of trouble getting it to run properly, and then playing decent chunks of it without it falling over. Your mileage may have varied, of course.
Oh no, I broke it.
I had a better experience than some other people. There was one point which I started the review with where my entire skeleton became detached from my body, which is a Fallout 4 thing that basically happens when the player's body is put into something and that thing moves. So I ended up with my skeleton detached and had to kind of look at kind of the gristle coming through my body for the rest of the game, which was fun.
Some projects fare better than others, and it must be said that not all fan-made games or total conversion mods have widespread issues. Enderall, for example, seems to be fairly free of game-breaking issues, but no big, intricate piece of software is perfect and bug-free, not even professionally made stuff. And there's no software bigger or more intricate than the average video game. By their very nature, modern games are a teetering stack of moving parts that can collapse at any moment for mysterious reasons known only to itself. It's why any new features or fixes that get released seem to take forever, because they have to go through a rigorous process to make sure they don't break other bits of the game, or that they don't cause the end user's CPU to go into a thermal shutdown loop or something equally unforeseen. The bottom line is, game dev is hard. It's astonishingly hard, even for well-financed teams of developers with producers and floor managers and accountants doing all the annoying paperwork for them, wrangling shuffling bits of magic rune-etched sand into making Skyrim happen should be impossible.
I'd expect there to be bugs. I wouldn't hold it to the same level of scrutiny as the main game.
Hopefully we release relatively major bug-free. I'm hoping that the whole, like, you know, we're unpaid, we're hobbyists will help us a little bit with the rougher edges they might come across, but hopefully we come out with a nice level of polish, and I think people will still be blown away.
As long as I can see that behind the bugginess, there's something ambitious and interesting being attempted. Like in Fallout London, you've got a Fallout thing that we've never seen before. This is a premise that we're probably not going to see the studio that controls this IP tackle anytime soon. There's enough kind of substance behind the bugginess. I usually will try and persevere and just get through it.
The Fallout London thing is incredible, the fact that they did it. I'm assuming the people who worked on that were numerous. I'm sure that puts a lot of pressure on Skyblivion actually as well, because they're probably looking at a project like that has succeeded and has had a certain level of media attention. So that probably increases the pressure a lot for them and might make it, come back to my same point, might make it less fun to work on.
When you're in the games industry, media can't shut up. People are always asking you, how do I get in? Got any advice? And it's the same with most creative industries. Firstly, don't bother. And then when they've stopped being facetious, there isn't a single route that gets you in. But generally you've got to do stuff to prove you can do stuff and put yourself out there so your name comes up when opportunities are flying around. In summary, go to events, don't be a knob, have a portfolio. I mean, you can be a knob later, just not when you're starting out. This is why the mod scene, and by extension hobbyist game development as a whole, is so important to the industry at large, and a big part of why so many studios from Bethesda to CD Projekt Red to Valve make and publish free tools that people can use to make free add-ons to their games. It's part of the reason why you can go and download the full Unreal 5 creation suite right now and start making stuff without paying Epic a single penny. Yes, these firms have hard-nosed business reasons for doing this. Mods keep Bethesda in the news. Epic want young professionals dialed into their ecosystem.
Being off with Skyblivion, and kind of focus on modern game design techniques because you're working with an old engine. It's fun to start learning software like Substance Designer and Unreal Engine.
So in the case of the Elder Scrolls Construction Kit, they are really good hiring tools. So if you've got a community that are building that stuff with that tech, you basically do the onboarding through their own time. They've already done it. And it's a way of keeping the game in the conversation, I guess. That sounds a bit corporate, but it is true.
It's not surprising that the Skyblivion project was warmly embraced by Bethesda around the time of Oblivion Remastered dropping. Today's hobbyists are tomorrow's professionals. That's been the paradigm in creative industries for a long time now. I'm sure a lot of the people currently working professionally in the games industry see a reflection of themselves in the amateur creatives and the up-and-comers.
When you're working on a project like that, you're always very grateful to Bethesda because they just sit back and watch, like, proud. So they do, you know, as opposed to maybe some other companies might do takedowns. They don't. So we're always grateful for Bethesda being that way.
When I was at Splash Damage hiring for Gears Tactics, the CVs that were popping out to me were the ones who were still modding because I thought you still care. A lot.
We're doing this, you know, partly in a way to thank them, you know, kind of show like this is how this looked to us when we played it, you know.
There was a quite clear difference because people had a really rich understanding of the thing that they were used to modding. So, because you have to know a game inside out to be able to make things for it. Whereas if you're making your own game, you can kind of be a bit vaguer because you're building things for that game. So I always found that the modders, though there were fewer of them, were always the ones that sort of came out on top.
Most, you know, developers, they're making the game, so they don't know what it looks like necessarily until it's kind of finished. And, you know, we're making this game with the hindsight of, like, we know what Oblivion looks like, we know what Oblivion feels like, we know what people like. So you kind of have that opportunity to go back and, you know, make a lot more connections to things. That's definitely a big positive of working on something that's already been made.
In a world where arts funding is being throttled by austerity-obsessed governments, where formal education is prohibitively expensive, where your personal brand is more important than your qualifications, if you're a firm in the business of making and selling video games, it's in your interest to make sure there are always people around whose labour you can rely on to do it. Mod making is as legitimate a path to gainful employment as having a degree or a famous dad.
So I'm definitely a self-taught developer.
Sean doesn't have a famous dad, by the way, that was just an unfortunate cut.
I started out making games in my free time as a kid, taking games like Duke Nukem, using the level editors that shipped on the disc, and I started doing that for Half-Life. Just trying lots of different things, just trying to see what sort of stuck, what I enjoyed. Building a portfolio that got me my first job, which was at Midway.
I want you to say Wheelman.
Yeah, so my first game was Wheelman, which was fun. It was a good way to learn a lot about the industry because it was Midway, which was a big company, which was also going through a lot of problems at the time, so I got to kind of see that. So I got the wide-eyed, oh look, I'm working at a big company, and then, oh look, the company's going under. So I got to see the sort of the two ends of the spectrum there. And it was an open world game, so I learned a lot, and that kind of pigeonholed me a little into working on open world games from there. And now I'm currently working for Fireblade Software doing indie stuff. I think it is important that we continue pushing modding and releasing tools so that people can learn development, because it isn't great if people have to go through the university route. Like, by default, that isn't a great option. Not as in university isn't a great option, it's not a great option to force that. There are people who learn in different ways. I was awful in school. Having that option to kind of learn at my own pace and learn the things that I cared about most meant that it gave me a calling, basically, and I think giving other people that is an amazing thing to do.
Given the extraordinary amount of blood, sweat and tears it takes to build a total conversion mod the size and scope of Fallout London or Skyblivion or Enderall, nobody would begrudge anyone involved keeping one eye on their job prospects as they toil away.
I'd not expected them to have managed to do anywhere near the level of granular detail that they've done. It feels like somebody should be paying them. Not me though, I'm skint.
So it's interesting that Bethesda's attempts to monetize mods, first with their Creation Club and now with Creations, which offers some kind of revenue split that's usually under NDA, has mostly been met with criticism from the wider community. People aren't against the idea of modders being supported either by Patreon or some other means, but there is a general disdain for the idea of paying directly for mods, which are seen as something you should naturally get for free, and perhaps it's because modding is seen as something you do out of passion. There's a pervasive belief that anyone seeking to make a profit out of it just isn't doing it for the right reasons.
Our work will be freely available to anyone who owns the original games, and no amount of money will change my mind on this subject. This project has always been a labor of love, not profits.
The Skyblivion team have done extraordinarily well at priming their project for success. In the realm of the non-profit endeavour, success is not measured in revenue, but in plaudits, social media buzz, bringing joy to people you've never met, and perhaps most importantly, the satisfaction of a job well done. Ultimately, Skyblivion is on a direct path to that success if it can just get over these last few hurdles of development.
Personally, I would love to see, this is just me like wishing, but I would love to see March 2026, because that would make the 20th anniversary of Oblivion. It'd be a nice, a fitting release date, I think. But that would give an extra 3 months, and that's like gold, you know, to us. I definitely feel like early 2026 will be nicer on the developers.
One of the few remaining good things about the hyper-techified information age we live in is how it democratizes art, creativity, freedom of expression, how, in theory, anyone can download the TES construction kit or a copy of DaVinci Resolve and start knocking things together. Rubbish things at first, usually, but then better things, impressive things, things that attract the attention of other similarly inclined creatives. The mod scene can be a wonderful and rewarding hobby, and it is also a breeding ground for talent that might otherwise never be nurtured. But it's a huge risk to expect or even hope that a hobbyist dev team of part-timers with day jobs can produce something that can really truly compete with a professionally produced game. It's certainly not impossible, but it's not really the point of the exercise. However it turns out, the best outcome is that the people behind it feel that satisfaction of having put something worthwhile out into the world.
I do genuinely believe people are going to absolutely love what they're playing, and it's going to feel like a very unique thing they're playing, because very rarely do you get to play something that's in, you know, production for this long, Not because of any development hell, but because he just wanted to take that amount of time to really focus on every detail. I genuinely don't think there has ever been a game of this size that has been made by hand. There are obviously bigger open world games than us, but I don't think any of them have the density of detail that have been done by hand than us. Even when you walk around this place, every rock and tree was placed by hand. So it was. And it's, I think it will definitely show.